This happened to me when I was a teenager, and this still haunts me to this day. I was babysitting for my neighbor across the street, Alice. I babysat for her often, almost every weekend, so we were very comfortable with one another and had a good routine. Rarely, Alice would have a friend sleep over, and on this particular night, that was the case. Jennifer was a first-time sleepover date, so she was a bit nervous, but I did my best to make her happy. Alice's parents left at around 6:30 p.m., setting the alarm behind them as they went. I bathed both girls and got them into bed to watch some Nickelodeon, as was our usual routine. Once the girls were happy, I went into the kitchen to grab some snacks. It was pouring rain outside, and next to the kitchen was a breakfast nook with glass doors and a series of glass windows. As I was preparing to walk back into the room, the phone rang. Alice's parents called often, so I always answered the phone. I picked up the phone and asked who it was. "Hi, how are you?" a male voice asked. "Hi, I'm doing well," I replied. "Are you calling for Jason, Alice's father?" "He isn't home, but I can take a message." "Maybe," he says to me, "maybe I'm calling to talk to you." Now, my spidey sense wasn't ringing just yet, and I figured it was a family member or a friend who was bored and wanted to chat. I politely but quickly said I had to go. The girls were calling for me to bring their snacks, so I hung up the phone. I brought Alice and Jennifer their snacks and was about to settle into the recliner chair in Alice's room when I heard the phone ring again. I hustled back into the kitchen to answer it without really thinking anything was peculiar. At least, not yet. "You know, it's rude to hang up on people, don't you?" He started off, but he wasn't angry or aggressive. It was a little hard to hear him over the thunder and rain, and both girls were calling for me to come back because they were scared of the thunder. "I'm sorry," I said. "I have to get back to the girls. Have a nice night." I heard him say something, but hung up before I could hear what he said. The phone rang again. "Don't hang up on me," he said, with anger in his voice, but I hung up again. I was getting nervous at this point. I went back in the room with the girls, and the phone rang again. At that point, Alice was asking me to not leave her again, so I didn't answer. But the phone rang again and again. Finally, 10 minutes had passed without a call, and it rang again. This time, I thought that perhaps it was Alice's parents, so I peeled myself away from the girls to go and answer the phone. "You fucking cunt. Don't you hang up on me," he screamed. "Leave me alone. If you call again, I will call the cops, you psycho," I screamed back. I hung up the phone and turned around to see Alice and Jennifer were now standing behind me. They looked terrified, so I offered to get some ice cream bars from the freezer. I went to the freezer and the phone rang again. Alice answered it. I don't know what he was saying, but I heard screaming, and Alice looked absolutely terrified. I grabbed the phone and was about to unleash on him when he said, "That's a nice pink shirt you're wearing." I hung up the phone and realized that not only was I wearing a pink shirt, but that during the second phone call I received, there was a clap of thunder that I heard on the phone at the same time I heard it in the house. It wasn't until that moment that the realization hit me. Now, I was a teenager at this point, thinking I was invincible and having no concept of my own mortality, but a higher sense of consciousness kicked in and guided my next few actions. I hit the light switch in the kitchen as it controlled most of the lights in that immediate area. I grabbed both girls, their barking dog Alex, and shoved us all into the pantry. The pantry door opened inward, so I pushed up against the shelves and shoved a giant bag of rice against the door. I then had my back against the shelf, my feet pushing against the rice to help secure the door, and I had a girl in each arm, with my hands over their mouths. I pinned the dog between my legs, and although he constantly barked, he somehow knew to stay quiet at that moment. And the alarm started sounding, and the phone started ringing. All of us were trembling, but I was determined to not cry in front of the girls. Between the alarm and the thunderstorm, I couldn't hear much. After what felt like an hour, I heard a female voice calling and asking if anyone was in the house. She was in front of the pantry and announced that she was a police officer, and that it was safe to come out. She clearly knew I wasn't going to take her on her word, so she slid her badge under the door. I moved 1 foot from the bag of rice and held her badge towards me. The police had turned the lights on, so I was able to see from the light streaming in under the pantry door that this was in fact a badge. I cautiously made my way out of the pantry, shielding the girls behind me. The female officer, Officer Wesley didn't look alarmed at all, and I quickly realized why. "It's scary when the alarms go off," she said. "But next time you need to answer the phone and let the alarm company know everything is okay, instead of hiding. Sending officers out to a house isn't a joke." I looked at her confusingly. "We didn't set off the alarm," I said, stammering, and I started to cry. "We haven't opened any doors." She looked at me with confusion and then said, "Then who made those footprints?" From the back door, the sliding glass door in the kitchen nook, to the pantry, and out of the front door were muddy footprints. In front of the pantry was a bunch of prints, as if someone had paced in front of the door for a while. The footprints led out of the front door, which was still open when the police arrived. I was hysterical, and the police called Jason and Janelle, Alice's parents, to come home from the restaurant. Within earshot, but clearly not meant for me to overhear, Officer Wesley's partner informed her that the door in the nook had been pried open. I looked out over the pool deck and could see where the trail of footprints had started from the grass and into the house. They were mostly dissolved at that point, due to the rain, but it was very clear that someone had walked from the side of Alice's house and towards the glass door. We waited for Alice's parents to come home before I left. When the police recounted the night's events, I remember thinking in passing that neither of Alice's parents looked as terrified as I thought they should have, given the events of the evening. The police walked me home and told my parents what happened. My mother and father were both very, very upset. A few extra officers patrolled the neighborhood for a few weeks, but never caught the perpetrator, nor was he ever heard from again. And I never babysat for Alice again. I was too frightened. Fast forward a few years, and Jason, Alice's father, went to prison for tax evasion, or so we were told. Years later, when I was home visiting, I ran into Jason as he was leaving the house on his motorcycle. He stopped to chat with me, and I asked him the one nagging question I had for years. "Did you really go to jail for tax evasion?" Now at that point, Jason and Janelle were divorced. She left him for her dead sister's husband, which is pretty dark, and I guess that Jason didn't feel that he needed to keep up any pretenses. He told me that, no, he was sent to prison for drug running. He regaled me with the tale of how he was caught in a high-speed chase and bragged about how he was one of the biggest dealers in the area for years, till he was busted. And then I knew. The person he was calling that night was trying to exact some sort of punishment on Jason. Maybe he was a rival dealer, or maybe Jason worked for him and had pissed him off. But that's why Jason and Janelle didn't seem as alarmed as they should have. By the grace of God and an alarm system, we were not killed that night, but I knew that Jason's actions had led to that night's events. I knew it in my gut. This haunts me to this day, and I think I helped solidify a healthy understanding of my own mortality as well as the depravity that may be within others. I'm not overly paranoid, but I'm cautious, and I think rightly so. My stupid teenage antics, for the most part, stopped dead in their tracks. When I was in high school, I was like 16. I had a friend Lisa and a second friend Zoe. Lisa had like a lot of money, and her huge house was located right next to our high school. So every time we had a break or anything, the three of us would go there, and we would also have a lot of sleepovers at her house. It was this huge rich people's house, so it was awesome to stay there. So one day, we decided to stay the night there. The three of us plus Lisa's little sister, Anna. Their mother was gone for the night. We decided to put on some PJs and watch scary movies for hours. Anna went to bed before us three, and we just stayed in the living room watching TV. At one point, the alarm goes on. It happens sometimes, so Lisa just goes to turn it off, and that was it. But then, like 10 minutes later, the alarm goes on again, and it scares us because it's not supposed to. Technically, the alarm was made to only ring when humans came by, because the house was located in the middle of the forest, so we all knew that sometimes animals would come by the house. It's happened before. So when the alarm was installed, it was calibrated for humans only, and it was the second time it rang. We started to get a little bit scared, so we went upstairs, opened the windows to look at the garden all around the house, and saw nothing. We even went on the balcony in the middle of the night. Still nothing. I was alone on the balcony at some point, and the alarm went on again, and the automatic lights around the swimming pool turned on. That meant something was around the pool, and I was just above it. I got so scared I got on my knees and stayed there until my friend deactivated the alarm and the lights, and I ran inside the house. At this point, we were really scared and started thinking about what it could be. If If it has to be any human, all our lights were on, so they knew where we were. We turned all the lights off, and all 4 of us went hiding downstairs in the kitchen, without our phones. I don't even know why not even one of us thought about taking at least one phone. So we were there, lights off, scared in this huge house, with windows everywhere we could look. The alarm went berserk again. Anna screamed and Lisa took her with her, reassuring her while walking to shut the alarm off, to finally turn it off once and for all. So I was in the kitchen, with Zoe only, and we were just looking all around us. The alarm was upstairs, so the 2 girls were far from us. At some point, we heard footsteps right behind us, like right on the other side of the wall in the garden. It was fast, not scared, just fast, like that person knew where they were going. So we just froze, waiting in the dark, and jumped when something, well, someone, it was obvious, walked by the door and window right in front of us. We think it was a he, had a light, but it was another light that allowed us to see his silhouette. So there were at least 2, running around the house for about at least 20 or 30 minutes. Detail, but this door was, like I said, a windowed door, but there were Venetian blinds on it, and they were not closed, of course. We were still not moving, and the girls upstairs were so scared that they stayed there. At least it's what they told us. Suddenly, one voice, then a second one. I was unable to understand anything, but I heard it, and Zoe and I were blinded by a sudden light right at our faces. We were literally not able to move, scream, talk, or do anything. Nothing we could have done was possible. We were just frozen in fear. The light stayed there. Someone was seeing us through the blinds. Somebody was watching us being scared and was just staying there. Suddenly, we heard a hard sound on the front door, which was closed. So we didn't move at all, but I don't know what took me. It just woke me up, and I crawled to the door in front of me, the back door, closed the blinds, and just held the door in place, in case the guy on the other side tried to force it open. Honestly, I'm small and thin. My little body was probably useless here, but I did it anyway. The one at the front door was still trying to enter, Zoe still not moving. The 2 girls upstairs doing I don't know what, and the one just a glass window away from me started hitting it, trying to force it open. It was closed, but I just grabbed the handle and hung it there for a while. He was just hitting and trying to open the door. All of this lasted hours in my head, but I believe it was only a few seconds. At one point, the hits at the front door stopped. A few seconds later, the other one in front of me stopped as well. Then, the lights just moved fast everywhere. The alarm did nothing. Zoe and I just slept in the kitchen, and the 2 sisters upstairs. Nothing happened at all. It was over. The next day, Lisa's and Anna's mom came back home, and we told her everything. Got a bit yelled at because we didn't call the cops. I took it wrong at the time, but I understand now why she got upset. She called the cops, who went to see the house, and discovered footprints all around it. Some muddy footprints and marks on the front door. They said they must have kicked the door, and that was it. They told us it must have been some guys who were just doing some reconnaissance. You know when they just walk around the houses to see how to rob them? It was common in this area. There were a lot of really big and beautiful houses filled with expensive things. The only thing I will never be able to explain is why they started being so aggressive. Originally, they were just walking around the house, but I think that if they were trying to see something or just look things up, they would have left when they realized we were inside, or at least left when that guy saw us in the kitchen. Well, they didn't. The moment they saw us in the kitchen, they didn't see the 2 sisters. They started being aggressive and trying to force the doors to enter the house where we were. I don't know if they really wanted to rob the house. I will never, and honestly, I don't want to know. I didn't spend any more nights at this house. I was so scared that they would come back again that I couldn't sleep there. Lisa was a bit mad, like she didn't understand, but from what she told Zoe and me, she didn't see them. She just stayed upstairs with her sister. I understand it, but I wasn't able to stand the fact that she couldn't understand how scared I was as well. I must have been around 8 years old at the time this happened, and my sister was 12 or 13. We lived in a tiny little house that we called the shack, that her mom moved us into after she split up with her father. It was all we could afford. My sister and I shared a tiny bedroom, but one perk about the house was the huge backyard, with a large above-ground pool and deck that we could always play on. We had a big privacy fence, and being the nosy little kid I was, I liked to climb on some of the wooden boards of the fence and check out the neighbors. I recognized the two little boys who lived in the house kitty corner to us because they went to my school. I made it a habit every day to climb up the side of my fence and hang around and talk to them. I never actually climbed over the fence, just climbed a plank so I was high enough to peer over and talk. They had an uncle named Randy who was probably in his 20s or 30s, and he was usually in the backyard doing housework, so I got to know him as well. Both me and my sister would hang on the fence and chat with him most days. The conversations were always innocent, and he seemed like a nice guy. Now looking back, I can see some red flags about him. I remember one time he had a basketball and accidentally threw it over our fence. We offered to grab it for him, but he insisted he could get it himself and hopped over the fence with ease. He thought nothing of it at the time, but I imagine this was to test how easily or fast he could scale the fence. One day in passing, my sister mentioned to him that our mom works the night shift, and therefore it was just the two of us alone at night in the house. That was all he needed to hear. Shortly after that, it happened. I woke up one night to the sound of my sister crying. We shared a bunk bed, me on the bottom, and when I stood up, she was out of bed, leaning against the wall on the phone crying. I asked her what was wrong, but she assured me everything was fine and to go back to sleep, so I did. It wasn't until the next day that I learned what happened. Apparently, in the middle of the night, while our mom was away at work, Randy jumped the fence and tried to break in. He started banging on our bedroom window, telling my sister to let him in. She refused, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. So he started walking around the entire house, banging on the windows, yelling for her to let him in, and trying all the doors. That's when she got out of her bed and called 911, and I woke up. Yeah, I have no idea how I managed to sleep through all that commotion, because she tells me he was banging on her window, right by the bed, loudly. But I guess you could just sleep like you're dead when you're little. Of course, by the time the cops arrived, all he had to do was jump the fence in 10 seconds, and he was back in his yard. They knocked on his door, but he denied he did it, so the police said there was nothing they could do. We were shaken up by the incident, of course. My mom wasn't able to change her work schedule, so she started having us stay at our dad's at night. A few years passed without incident, and we assumed everything was fine. I had long stopped talking to the boys next door. Then it happened again. Guess who slept through the whole thing again? My sister was a couple of years older now and had a group of her friends over for a sleepover one night. We had a sliding glass door to the backyard near where they were all sitting. The door had the typical vertical blinds, except weeks earlier one of them had broken and we couldn't get it to stay back on no matter what. So there was a gap in between the blinds where the broken one was gone. Anyway, the girls were all sitting around the couch playing board games when one of my sister's friends suddenly turned rigid. She said, "Don't freak out, but there's a guy standing at your sliding glass door." They all turned around and there was Randy again, his face pressed up to the glass where the gap in the blinds were, just watching them all. Naturally, everyone freaked out and 911 was called. Just like last time, he jumped the fence and the cops said they couldn't prove anything, even though they described what he was wearing and he answered the door in the same outfit when the police questioned him. That was the last straw, so we moved out of that house and got a restraining order against him. He didn't show up to court that day, so the judge automatically granted us the order. Never saw him again. Last I checked, I looked him up online. He's currently in prison for a bunch of random charges.